high up in the frozen peaks of the Schnellstal Glacier, 3,200 meters above sea level. A secret lay buried for over 5,000 years. When two German hikers stumbled upon a brown, weathered shape poking out of the ice in 1991, they thought they had found a modern mountaineer who had met an unfortunate end. Ötzi the Iceman is not just a mummy, he is a biological time capsule that has redefined everything we thought we knew about the Copper Age. A shot from an arrow, a fall in the snow, and a quick passage into history. But hold on to your seats, because new high-definition scans and forensic protein analysis have just flipped the script. The latest evidence suggests that Ötzi didn't just pass away quietly in the cold. He endured a sequence of events so harrowing and a struggle so prolonged that it changes our entire understanding of his final journey. We are looking at a multi-day chase, a desperate stand, and a level of physical trauma that was previously hidden beneath layers of ancient skin. To understand why these new scans are such a big deal, we first have to look at what we thought we knew. For years, the narrative was simple. Ötzi was walking through the Alps. Someone shot him in the back with an arrow, hitting a vital artery, and he expired within minutes. Case closed. But modern science doesn't like simple answers. When researchers used the latest dual-energy computed tomography, they saw things that previous X-rays simply couldn't pick up. They found deep tissue bruising and bone fractures that weren't caused by the ice pressing down on him over millennia. These injuries happened while he was still moving. These new scans show that before that fateful arrow ever left the bow, Ötzi had been involved in a serious physical altercation. We are talking about a hand-to-hand struggle that occurred perhaps 24 to 48 hours before his end. His right hand bears a deep defensive wound, a cut that goes right down to the bone between his thumb and index finger. In the world of forensics, that is a classic sign of someone grabbing a blade to defend themselves. He was fighting for his life long before he reached the summit. Imagine the scene 5,300 years ago. He is a man on the run. The latest analysis of the pollen found in his digestive tract tells a story of incredible physical exertion. He was moving from the high alpine meadows down to the valley floor, and then back up into the high peaks within a very short window of time. Why would a man in his mid-40s suffering from joint pain and intestinal parasites be sprinting up and down mountains? He was being hunted. The new scans of his lungs and stomach show high levels of stress hormones that were locked into his system at the moment he passed. This wasn't a peaceful trek. This was a high-stakes pursuit through some of the most unforgiving terrain on the planet. He was exhausted, he was wounded from a previous fight, and he was climbing into a blizzard. But the real shocker comes from the investigation of his brain. Previously, the focus was all on the arrow wound in his shoulder. And yes, that arrow hit the subclavian artery, which would cause significant internal bleeding. But the new scans revealed a massive hematoma at the back of his skull. For a long time, people thought he just fell forward when he was hit by the arrow. The new data suggests something much more sinister. The trauma to the back of his head indicates he was either struck with a blunt object or he fell backward with immense force onto a rock. This head injury was likely the final blow that rendered him unconscious. Imagine the agony of surviving a knife fight, fleeing up a mountain with a bleeding hand, getting shot in the back with an arrow, and then, as you are stumbling, receiving a massive blow to the head. The level of suffering he endured in those final hours is far beyond what the original reports suggested. The detail provided by these new scans is almost uncomfortable. We can see the contents of his last meal in such high resolution that we know exactly what he ate about 30 minutes before the end. He had some dried ibex meat, some einkorn wheat, and some spicy sloe berries. This meal tells us something vital about his mindset. If you are running for your life, do you stop for a heavy, fatty meal? Probably not. This suggests that Ötzi thought he had finally lost his pursuers. He found a sheltered spot behind a rock outcropping, took off his heavy copper axe, and sat down to eat. He thought he was safe. And that is perhaps the most tragic part of the story. He let his guard down for just a moment, and that was when the arrow found him. The cowardice of the act is striking. He was shot from a distance, from behind, while he was eating, because the new scans have revealed secrets there too, but only 2 of them were finished and ready to use. The rest were just shafts. His bow was a massive piece of yew wood, but it wasn't strung. This tells us he was in the middle of frantically repairing his equipment. He had lost his primary weapons in a previous encounter, When you look at the new scans of his copper axe, you see tiny microscopic nicks and blood residue from 4 different individuals. This wasn't just a tool for chopping wood. This was a weapon of war. The blood on his cloak and tools suggests he was carrying a wounded comrade at one point, or perhaps he was tangling with several attackers at once. This wasn't a one-on-one duel. It was an ambush by a group. The scientific community is now looking at Ötzi as a victim of a sophisticated ancient power struggle. Why would someone follow a man 3,200 meters into a glacier just to take him out? They didn't even take his copper axe. Back then, a copper axe was like a supercar. It was a symbol of immense wealth and power. If the motive was robbery, the axe would be the first thing gone. The fact that his expensive tools were left with him suggests this was a political hit or a ritualistic removal of a leader. They wanted him gone, but they didn't want his ghost to haunt them by taking his possessions. The new scans of the surrounding area show that his body was placed in a very specific position, almost as if he was laid to rest after the violence ended. Some researchers now argue that he wasn't just left to rot where he fell, but that he was formally buried by his own people after the attackers moved on. This would explain why his gear was so neatly arranged. The sheer biology of his body is also telling us more about his daily life than we ever thought possible. For a long time, people thought these were tribal markings. Specifically his lower back, knees, and ankles. They correspond almost exactly to modern acupuncture points. Ötzi was a man in constant pain, even before the chase began. Every step up that mountain must have been a Herculean effort. He wasn't a young warrior in his prime. He was a middle-aged man pushing his body to the absolute limit. Let's dive deeper into the arrow wound itself. The new high-res scans allowed scientists to create a 3D reconstruction of the arrow's path. It entered through the back, narrowly missing the lungs but tearing through the subclavian artery. In a modern hospital, that is a surgical emergency. It was a slow fade. But here is the catch. The new scans show that the arrow shaft was broken off and removed. This wouldn't happen if he just fell. Someone had to pull that shaft out. If Ötzi did it himself, he would have caused even more damage to the tissue. If an attacker did it, they were trying to hide their identity or retrieve their arrow. The visualization of the internal clotting shows he likely survived for a few agonizing hours, rather than minutes. He had time to realize he wasn't going to make it off the mountain. The environment played a massive role in preserving this evidence. Usually, when someone passes away in nature, the elements and scavengers quickly dismantle the remains. But the new geological scans of the gully where he was found show a perfect storm of conditions. He was in a small depression that protected him from the crushing weight of the moving glacier above. Shortly after he passed, he was covered by a layer of fresh snow that eventually turned to ice, freeze-drying him. This prevented oxygen from reaching the tissues, stopping the process of decay. This is why his eyes, his brain, and his internal organs are so well preserved. We are able to look at the cells of a man who lived before the pyramids were built as if he passed yesterday. And what those cells are saying is that the level of physical trauma he carried was staggering. The proteomics, the study of proteins in the body, have revealed that Ötzi's immune system was in overdrive at the time of his end. He was fighting off various infections, and his lungs were full of soot from spending his life around open fires and small huts. The new scans show a man whose body was a map of a hard life. He was a survivor. This makes his final end even more poignant. He had overcome so much, had survived so many injuries, only to be taken out by a sneak attack in the one place he felt safe. The new scans give us a window into the sheer tenacity of this ancient man. One of the most interesting new findings from the scans involves his stomach. For years, researchers couldn't even find his stomach because it had shifted upward in his torso as he was mummified. When they finally located it using 3D imaging, they were shocked by how full it was. This reinforces the last meal theory, but also adds a layer of biological irony. A full stomach actually made him more vulnerable. Fatty meal like ibex meat requires a lot of blood flow to be diverted to the gut, often making a person feel lethargic and slow. He might have been more alert. His final choice to eat a big meal may have been what slowed his reflexes just enough for his attacker to close the distance. Let's talk about the copper axe again. New chemical scans of the copper blade have traced the ore back to a specific mine in southern Tuscany. This is hundreds of miles away from where he was found. This reveals a massive trade network that existed in Europe much earlier than we thought. Ötzi wasn't just a local mountain man. He was part of a complex, interconnected world. He was likely a person of extremely high status, perhaps a shaman or a clan leader. Copper was the newest, most advanced technology. Owning a copper axe was the equivalent of owning a top-tier piece of military hardware today. The fact that he was targeted specifically while carrying such a valuable item suggests the motive was purely to remove him from the board. It was a targeted assassination of a political figure. The scans of his teeth also tell a tale of a changing world. He had significant cavities and wear, which points to a diet that had shifted from hunting and gathering to early agriculture. He was eating processed grains that wore down his enamel. This shift in diet brought about new dental problems that his ancestors didn't have to deal with. This transition also brought about more competition for land and resources, which is likely what led to the violence that claimed his life. The world was getting crowded, and the first lords were emerging, fighting over territory in the fertile valleys below the peaks. If you are listening to this and wondering why we are still talking about a 5000-year-old mummy, it's because Ötzi is the only reason we know the truth about our ancestors. Without him, we would just have stone tools and pottery shards. With him, we have skin, hair, stomach contents, and the story of a dramatic, violent end. The new scans have taken a two-dimensional story of an arrow wound and turned it into a cinematic, multi-day epic of survival and betrayal. We can see the struggle in the fibers of his being. We can see the fear in the chemical markers of his brain. We are no longer looking at a specimen. We are looking at a person. The forensic teams are now investigating the possibility that Ötzi wasn't alone. Some of the blood found on his tools belongs to a second person, but it isn't his. This leads to the loyal companion theory. Was he trying to save someone else? Was he part of a small group that was wiped out? The path he took was a difficult one, even for someone who lived in the mountains. He was taking a shortcut through a high pass that is often blocked by snow. This suggests he was desperate to get over the ridge to the other side, perhaps back to his own village where he would have support. He was only a few hours of walking away from safety when the arrow struck. As we look at these new scans, the most striking thing isn't the violence, but the humanity. We see a man who went to great lengths to care for his health with his tattoos. We see a man who took pride in his tools, keeping his axe sharp and his clothing repaired with beautiful, complex stitching, using animal sinews. He was a skilled craftsman, a resilient hiker, and a courageous fighter. The new evidence doesn't just show a worse end, it shows a bigger life. A life of struggle that ended in a tragic betrayal. The Iceman isn't just a mummy in a freezer in Italy, he is a ghost from our past, reminding us that the human story has always been one of intense struggle and incredible endurance. The latest neurological scans are still being analyzed, but early reports suggest that the blow to the head might have caused a period of confusion before he finally drifted off. He wouldn't have understood why he was suddenly unable to move. The cold would have eventually acted as a sort of anesthetic, but the preceding trauma was immense. This new data highlights the sheer brutality of life in the Copper Age. There was no mercy at 3,200 feet. It was a world where you were either fast or you were history. Scientists are now planning to use even more advanced scanning techniques, like sub-millimeter MRI, to look at the preservation of his skin cells and see if they can find traces of the actual environment in which he lived, like the specific water he drank or the air he breathed in his final village. Every time technology takes a step forward, Ötzi has more to tell us. He is the guest who keeps on giving. And as we refine our understanding of his end, we realize that the original murder mystery was just the tip of the iceberg. The reality was much more complex, much more violent, and much more human. So, when we look at the headlines about Ötzi suffering a worse death, it's a reminder that archaeology isn't just about dusty pots. It's about uncovering the truth of the human experience. But his story continues to travel around the world, teaching us about the origins of our medicines, our technologies, and our conflicts. He is a mirror into a world that was both alien and incredibly similar to our own. A world where a man would climb a mountain to save his life, only to be stopped by the one thing he couldn't see coming. The story of the Iceman is far from over. With every new scan and every new discovery, we get closer to the man himself. We understand his pain, his effort, and his final, desperate moments. We honor the memory of a man who, despite everything the world threw at him 5,000 years ago, managed to survive long enough for us to finally find him and tell his story. He is the ultimate survivor, even in his final rest. As the ice continues to melt and the technology continues to evolve, who knows what other secrets are waiting to be revealed from the frozen heights of the Italian Alps. One thing is for certain, Ötzi hasn't finished surprising us yet. The level of trauma revealed in these latest images serves as a reminder of how tough our ancestors were. Most of us struggle with a minor headache, but Ötzi was navigating glaciers with a deep knife wound and a failing heart. His resilience is the stuff of legend. It forces us to reconsider the human capacity for endurance. He wasn't just a victim, he was a powerhouse of a human being who was eventually brought down by a combination of factors that would have stopped any modern adventurer instantly. The new scans changed the narrative from a simple accident or a quick skirmish to a profound tragedy of ancient politics and personal survival. It's a story of a man who did everything right, who fought hard, who traveled fast, and who thought he had finally won, only to have fate intervene. It reminds us that no matter how much technology we have, Ötzi the Iceman remains the most important archaeological find of the 20th century. And thanks to 21st century science, we are finally seeing the full picture of the incredible hardships he faced in his final days. It's a story that is as chilling as the ice that preserved him, and as powerful as the mountains he once called home. We also have to consider the incredible precision that researchers are achieving with these scans. They can now distinguish between different types of blood cells and even see the structure of the bacteria that lived in his gut. This lets them reconstruct his entire health profile, showing that he was actually quite unwell. He had whipworm in his intestines, which would have caused terrible stomach aches and malaise. Imagine knowing all of this, just from looking at the shadow of a man in ice. The science is as breathtaking as the mountaineering. It's a testament to our desire to know our past, no matter how deeply it's buried. The discovery of Ötzi has also spurred new types of research in glaciology and climate science. Because we know exactly when he passed away, the ice layers around him act as a chronological marker. The new scans of the ice core samples from the area show that the climate changed abruptly shortly after he was buried. If the weather hadn't turned suddenly and stayed cold for 5 millennia, he would have been lost to the ages. The fate of the man and the fate of the planet's climate are inextricably linked in this one archaeological site. As the ice in the Alps continues to retreat due to modern climate change, more items from Ötzi's world are being found. Wooden leggings, bits of hide, and ancient tools are being spit out by the glaciers. Each one adds a piece to the puzzle of the Copper Age, but none will ever be as significant as the man himself. He remains the center of the story, the silent witness to a transition period in human history that laid the foundations for the modern world. The final image we have of Ötzi, thanks to the new scans, is that of a man who was deeply connected to his environment, but also betrayed by it and his fellow man. It's a complex, multi-layered ending that reflects the complexity of the life he lived. He wasn't just a mummy, he was a master of the mountains, a bearer of the most advanced tech of his day, and a survivor of a brutal time. His legacy, preserved in the ice and revealed by modern science, is a testament to the fact that while the world changes, the essence of the human struggle remains constant. So the next time you think about the ancient past, don't think of it as a silent, static place. Think of it as a place of action, of high-stakes chases, of incredible technology, and of people who were just as tough, if not tougher than we are today. Think of Ötzi, standing on that ridge looking out over the mountains he had conquered, unaware that he was about to become immortal through the very ice he was trying to cross. His story is our story, and thanks to these new scans, we finally know just how much he went through to get it to us. It's a harrowing, impressive, and ultimately unforgettable tale from the dawn of civilization. The researchers and forensic specialists involved in the latest study have mentioned that every time they look at the scans, they find something new. It's like a book with an infinite number of pages. They are now looking at the marrow in his bones to see how his body was reacting to the lack of oxygen at such high altitudes. This could lead to breakthroughs in how we understand modern altitude sickness and tissue recovery. Ötzi isn't just teaching us about the past. He's contributing to the science of the future. In closing, the new scans of Ötzi the Iceman prove that the more we look, the more we find. His worst death is a discovery that highlights the intensity of ancient life. It reminds us that 5,000 years ago, the stakes were for everything, every single day. Ötzi lost his final gamble, But in doing so, he won a place in the eternal history of our species. He remains the most studied person in human history. And yet, he still has secrets to tell. We just have to keep looking, keep scanning, and keep asking the questions that only he can answer from his frozen silence.